Grant Stevens.
So let's be honest, being able to do a dive roll is a pretty cool thing, and there's a reason why we see characters doing these in a large proportion of video games and movies. But a dive roll is a progression that builds upon the basic breakfall, and learning to breakfall is a skill that everyone can benefit from. You don't have to be able to do some flamboyant dive roll unless you want to, but just knowing instinctually how to fall correctly can save you from some unnecessary injuries. And there's also the performance aspect, which is why I initially learned how to do it, and so I'm going to cover that side of things as well for the performance guys watching this video. So welcome today guys, my name's Grant Stevens, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the benefits of learning to breakfall correctly, and I'm also going to be providing a practical tutorial on the movement and then progressing into more difficult variations like dive rolls. And before we get into the rest of the video, you can head to my channel, which is youtube.com/GrantStevensMA. My channel is mainly focused upon martial arts training, fitness and personal development. So for the first part, let's talk about some of the benefits of just having a basic understanding of how to breakfall correctly. Now, it is something that's essential in many martial arts styles, but even just for people that don't train in martial arts, having an understanding of this can go a long way towards injury prevention, especially in terms of being able to protect vulnerable areas of the body like the head, spine and the joints. And I'm sure you've seen accident clips like this online, but I always think a lot of this stuff could be subverted if people just learned how to fall safely. But in order to be able to do that, it needs to become something that's instinctual and kind of your natural reaction to falling, which you can only get through a lot of training, because a lot of people in these clips seem to assume a really similar shape where they just splay out, and the natural reaction for them seems to be to actually stare at the ground as they approach it. But you know, it doesn't have to be something really extreme like this either. Many people fall and break their arms and stuff like that because their instinct is to just put their hands down, and when you're traveling at enough speed towards the ground, your limbs are just going to buckle and can't take that pressure. And the goal with this will be to get to a level of naturalness to where your first reaction to stumbling or falling off balance will be to roll out and do a breakfall. And that's because you subconsciously know you're falling or approaching the ground at too great a speed to just put your hands down. And this is something that happened to me personally quite recently actually. I was riding my bike at quite a high speed and the chain for some reason snapped and went into the front wheel, sort of stopping the bike instantly and sending me flying over the handlebars. But my reaction to roll out was so instinctual that I didn't even realise it had happened until afterwards, and I was already back on my feet. And I was in the middle of a road as well at the time this happened, so it could have really been much worse. On the performance side, it carries loads of benefits in terms of skill development and will help other movement abilities incidentally with things like overall body awareness, coordination, and something that might not be so obvious is an improvement in your reflexes, specifically touching on what I said earlier with reacting and falling much more safely to unexpected trips and falls. And I know this isn't something that's likely to happen often for a lot of people, especially if you're somebody that's young and have good stability and balance and stuff, but I'm sure you'll be able to recall in your own life there are those incidents that are out of your control, like the one with me on my bike in which this happens, and so it's always just a good skill to know. So I personally learned how to do a dive roll when I was a kid, and it was before I'd done any martial arts training actually. It was just from seeing things in movies and like video games and stuff, and I just thought it was a cool skill to learn. And I'd say that's the best way to go about training something like this, is just to go out of your own curiosity and start trying things out in a way that's fun and enjoyable. But I noticed when I got a little bit older that this skill also transferred really well into other things I was into, like tricking, especially in terms of developing that overall body awareness and control, and you know, just making everything a little bit safer. And it just gives you a little bit more confidence when attempting some higher level moves, because inevitably a part of tricking is that you're going to crash and fall. So having that knowledge that you can fall safely is just going to give you that extra bit of reassurance. So those were just some of the benefits of learning how to breakfall and dive roll. But now we're going to move on to the practical section, and I'm going to be starting with a basic breakfall tutorial and building up into progressions of different variations of dive rolls.
And there's something else that might help with your breakfalls and general agility.
Barefoot shoes. So barefoot shoes, also sometimes called minimal footwear, are shoes essentially designed to more closely mimic the way that you use your feet when you're not wearing shoes, which is of course how our feet evolved to be used. So to this end, they have a much thinner sole, so you can actually feel the ground underneath your feet. They also come with no heel. There's no heel to toe drop. This not only forces you to use your body's full range of motion, you're not keeping your feet locked in that state of plantar flexion, but it also means that when you do push off your feet off the ground, you can do so more powerfully because you have more room to move. You have a wider toe box so your toes can splay out and balance, and all these things help you with this kind of agility, with rolls, with balancing, with climbing, all those things. And that's why I personally couldn't go back to regular footwear now. And Vivo Barefoot make, in my opinion, the very best barefoot shoes. And the great thing is they have such a wide variety for all different kinds of occasions. Whether you want to wear smart footwear, whether you want to go hiking, whether you're going to the gym, they're extremely comfortable, highly durable, and they're ethically sourced. So I highly recommend giving them a try. And Bioneer viewers can get 15% off their order by going to vivobarefoot.com and then entering code TheBioneer15. Thanks again to Vivo Barefoot for sponsoring this video. And now back over to Grant.
So now we're going to move on to the tutorial section, and the first thing we're going to learn is the most basic level of breakfall, which is really simple. Start on one knee and place down the hand onto the ground of the same arm. So if your left knee is down with your right leg in front, then your left hand should be the one that's placed onto the ground. Then we use the opposite hand to guide us into the rolling motion, and we do that downwards at this angle. And then literally all you do is push off the legs to initiate the movement using that hand to guide you over. And when you do this, make sure that you're tucking in the head and legs in order to keep the momentum going during the roll, and you want to try and finish in a similar position to which you started. The next progression is to do this from a steady walk, and the important thing is to try to make the movement fluid, so you're not having to kill the momentum before doing the breakfall. Rather, you're flowing with it, and if you've done that well, then you should be able to walk straight off like I do here. When you've gotten used to this, I recommend doing something like this drill where you just perform repeated breakfalls going side to side without resetting too much during each one. And this is one of the ways that you can make this a natural reaction, is just by repeating it quickly and breakfalling in awkward and suboptimal starting positions. Next is a slight variation in which I'm breakfalling from a side-on position, and you might notice here at this angle it's not actually necessary for me to place down a hand, and instead I drop down onto my tricep and shoulder to guide me into the roll. And you can also do this walking backwards as well, as you can see here for another variation, and although it doesn't look the cleanest, it's better than slamming onto your back. So now we're going to move on to the actual dive roll, and I recommend building up to the full thing how I am doing here. So firstly, doing like a mini dive roll from a static position where you have really small amount of air time. And doing this from static is actually more difficult than from moving, so it's a good way to make sure you're really comfortable with that roll technique before building up. Next, just like how we built progression in the basic breakfall, we're going to walk into a mini dive roll to build confidence. Again, make sure you're carrying that momentum from the walk into the roll in a fluid motion. Then what we do is literally just build up the speed at which we approach the roll until we can do the full version from a short run. Once you're good at this, you can begin to make the dive more aggressive, which you can do by running faster into it and jumping higher. But to do this, it's important to lift the hands and legs upwards as you jump into it like this. So as you can see here, as I jump, there's that little push upwards, which gives me more height. Now, I hadn't really done any of these a long time before shooting this video, so I can see here that my technique isn't the cleanest, and I probably overdo the lifting of the leg, but you can see here how it creates this nice arc of movement that the body follows as the legs meet each other in the air. And lastly, it's really important to tuck your legs in tightly when you're rolling in, otherwise you're going to come out heavy and slam down. Again, think of a fluid motion throughout the whole movement. I admit on some of these I'm not optimally tucked in at the end and I'm coming down a little heavy, and this actually hurt quite a bit because the ground was solid from the frost, so heed the warning. A further variation, which is actually the way I prefer to do it, is to come down straight and roll over the head, and I find this actually produces a cleaner dive roll. When you do this, you place both hands down on the ground so you don't come down heavy, as you're going to roll straight over the head and spine. So I wouldn't do this unless you're already quite comfortable with the other version, as it's technically more dangerous, and you can build up to this in the same way as the others. A further variation is you can perform the dive roll from 2 feet, and this is a good version to do if you're diving through something, like in this clip, because you haven't got that space for the legs to be out of alignment. And you can notice in these clips that I'm also doing the straight over the head variation, as it feels more natural for me from the 2-footed jump. Next, you can begin to dive roll over obstacles, and I recommend starting with something small and ideally padded so you don't get injured, and then build up confidence to higher obstacles. There'll likely be a mental block with this that you have to overcome as well, and even if you know you're diving way higher than the obstacle, sometimes when approaching it you might freeze or hesitate, so just be careful and build up slowly. And finally, for a bit of showing off, if you get really comfortable with all of the other variations, you can do a running front flip. It's not a dive roll progression, but has the same general components and is actually a lot easier than it looks when you're traveling at enough speed. Right guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. As I touched on at the beginning of the video, this is something that you need to do a lot of repetitions for to make it habitual and your natural reaction if you fall off balance or something like that. So a way to do this in regular sessions to get those reps in is just to start using breakfalls as part of your warm-up. You often see wrestlers do this when they warm up. They'll do laps of doing forward rolls and other gymnastic skills in order to warm up for their main practice. Again, please head to my channel, youtube.com/GrantStevensMA, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, guys.